thank you so much for joining us. We have 3 of our ESR alumni, well, actually 4 and 5 with the 2 of our faculty here too. So I think what would be best is for us to go around, introduce ourselves, because even though we are part of the ESR community, it doesn't mean that we've all met or have had a chance to talk. So I'm Julie Dishman. I'm the Director of Recruitment and Admissions here at Earlham School of Religion, and I'm so glad to be here with all of you. You have all inspired me in so many ways. As I said, when Tracy joined, it just about brought tears to my eyes because I miss having her here on campus. I've known Tracy since 1994, so really glad to have Tracy here. So I'm going to go around on my screen and say each of your names and have you introduce yourselves. And if you want to just say a little bit, well, first let's just introduce yourselves, and then I'll have each of you say a little bit about what you have been doing and what you were doing at ESR. So Lynn, you're first on my screen.
I'm Lynn Mills. Tracy, I think you and I met at Earlham as undergrads, didn't we?
Yeah.
Eon ago. I don't even want to think about how long ago it was. And Michael and I were students together at ESR. I graduated in 1979, back in the dark ages when there were not very many women there, and the place didn't even exist anymore. I mean, the buildings and it's just totally different. It's kind of weird when I go back, but I'm glad to be here.
And what are you doing right now, Lynn?
Well, I'm retired now. I was a librarian. I was a social worker for about 20 years and then a librarian for about 20 years, but retired 3 years ago, I guess. So I've got volunteer jobs, out the wazoo and all that kind of thing. Plus I'm kind of doing ESR 2.0 or something. One of the things I feature or work into my day is time to read things that make me think. And so I'm really enjoying being able to do that. As a librarian, I always saw all these books that looked really exciting, but I didn't have time to read them when I was working. So now I'm taking time to read some of that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Lynn. Nikki Holland.
Hi, I'm Nikki Holland. I am the director of the Ministries from Friends United meeting in Belize. I just graduated from ESR in May of this year. So I haven't been out for very long and I miss it so much. Is there anything else?
No, that's fine right now. Thank you. Tracy.
Hi, Tracy Peterson, graduated from ESR in 1998 with peace and justice emphasis. So it's nice to be with all y'all, and looking forward to the conversation.
And where are you right now?
Oh, sorry, Tucson, Arizona.
Okay, great. And Lee, you're next on my list. Even though you just introduced yourself, we'll go ahead and do that again. I'm
Lee Waltz. I'm a second year MDiv, or I think I'm technically, I don't know, second or third year MDiv at Earlham. And I consider myself a Unitarian Universalist, but the most recent time I took the Belief-O-Matic, it said I'm a liberal Quaker. So you guys are rubbing off on me. So. Thanks, Lee. Michael.
Hello, friends. I'm Michael Burkle. I am the professor of Christian spirituality at ESR. I teach courses in spirituality, also in interfaith studies, and dare I say this while we're being recorded, just about anything I can get away with. So I like zooming across the curriculum. Good to be with you today. As you heard, I went to ESR back when it was kind of a garage band with Lynn back in the late Triassic period.
Thanks, Michael. Matt Hisrick.
Hello, everybody. Matt. I am the Dean of ESR and also a 2008 MDiv grad. I left ESR and went to worked for Indiana Yearly Meeting for a few years before I was called back home, and came in as the Director of Recruitment and Admissions for a few years before I landed my current role. So good to see all of you.
Thanks, Matt and Zay.
Hey y'all, I am Zay. I am here as a residential student. This is my first semester, and I am in already lots of good trouble. So I'm taking the advice of our ancestors, my ancestors in the African American Christian tradition. I am an MDiv student, and currently we're working on a social enterprise for the EPIC Challenge, which is very exciting here at the college. And I'm also laying the foundations for another social enterprise that I'll be starting next semester. I've applied to the writing fellowship because I've also written a manuscript on what it was like to be an African American engaging in urban ministry to the poor as a member of San Francisco monthly meeting. So I've already finished that manuscript, and I'm hoping to get an editor for that. And when I graduate in 2.5 years, my hope is to get revenue by operating as a part-time chaplain. And then my vocational calling is to start, if you will, or organize African-American ministries in the Southeast that are led by the Quaker Testimonies. So I'm glad to be here with you all.
Thanks, Zay. And I just got an email from a prospective student who is having a problem logging in. So I think I will go back to her and send her the information, but I think I'll give you a little assignment before I head that way. Lynn, and then Nikki and Tracy first, and then Michael, you, since you're an alum too, and Matt, if you could talk a little bit about what brought you to ESR in the first place. And Lynn, I'll let you go first.
Well, it was kind of an accident, actually. I'm trying to condense the story in my head. That's why I'm hesitating a little bit. My senior year as an undergraduate, I roomed with a woman who was already a student at ESR. And we quickly discovered that we could not study in the same room because what I was doing is really kind of boring. And what she was doing was very interesting. And she would read something and she would say, hey, listen to this. And she'd read me whatever it was. And we'd be off on these long discussions and neither one of us got our work done. After I had finished my undergraduate degree, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with myself at that point. And I decided, well, that would be a good time to come to ESR for what was called back then the Theological Reflection Year. I'd come for a year and take whatever I wanted to and, you know, kind of hang out and all that. And I did that and discovered that it was a really good place for me to be to work through some stuff that I had brought with me that was getting in my way of being a healthy human being. And there were wonderful people there who were willing to listen and help me walk through all of that. And Michael just tormented me through the whole thing, but that was helpful too, actually. And we could get started telling funny stories about stuff we did together, but we won't do that. But that's how I got there. And I left at the end of the year thinking, okay, I'm done. And people kept telling me, you know, you really need to come back. And I said, I'm done with school. It's taken me 5 years to get my undergraduate degree. Why in the world would I want to come back to school? And about 2 weeks later, I called up with sort of like with my tail between my legs and said, can I come back? And they still thought it was a good idea. And I did. And it was the perfect place for me to be, to work through that emotional baggage that I had brought with me. And I wouldn't be who I am today if I hadn't been there and done that.
Thanks, Lynn. How about you, Nikki?
At the beginning of 2015, my family moved to Mexico for a lot of reasons. And it was my whole family, my sister and my brother and my sister and her kids and my parents. And we were all there. I also have a husband and 3 children. So while we were there, in a different story, we became Quakers. And we figured that we needed a place to worship. And so we ended up making what eventually I called a Quaker House Church in Merida, in Mexico. And I started to pray that God would send a pastory person who knew how to do things. And God started to say to me, "You're right there. What are you doing about this?" Nothing. I'm not a pastor. Okay, so then I realized that I needed to go to seminary, and I wanted to go to a Quaker seminary. And so there was this one and then another one. I actually can't remember what it was now, but it was some Quaker seminary that had an online program. How many of those can there be? I'm not sure. But what I really wanted was a place to go where I could do research and learn things without having the answers predetermined. And what I found from many seminaries is that there is like a list of things that the seminary teaches. And so when you write papers, these are the conclusions you have to come to. So it's sort of like a defense of the beliefs of the seminary rather than a process of discovery and listening to the Spirit. And so while I was thinking about these two places, I met Sarah Northrup, Charlie and Sarah Northrup. And I said, "Do you guys know anything about Earlham School of Religion?" And Sarah started laughing because, of course, her father was the dean of ESR for a long time. And so she told me about it, and it seemed like ESR would be a good place to go to do sort of open-ended research. And it really was. It was a really wonderful place to be.
Thanks, Nikki. And Mimi just joined us, Mimi Holland. And right now, Mimi is our only prospective student on here. So Mimi had a hard time logging in. So I'm thinking that the prospective students got the wrong link or something. So I've asked Kristen if she would send out another link. So hopefully others can join us, but we are recording this so that we will be able to share it with our prospective students. So Mimi, Lynn Peary Mills is here with us, and Nikki Holland, and Tracy Peterson, Michael Burkle, Matt Hesrick are all ESR alums. And then we have a couple current students, Lee Waltz and Zay is here with us as well. And so we've had Lynn and Nikki talk to us a little bit about why they came to ESR. And so I'll share this recording with you later so that you can watch that. But Tracy, whoops, you're muted. Yep.
Yes, I did not want to come to ESR. Keith Esch is really responsible for me coming to ESR because I would see Keith at every gathering, and he would ask, "When are you coming to ESR?" Blah, 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 blah. And this went on for years. And finally, I said, "Okay, God, if you want me to go to ESR, it has to be a clear sign. I need clarity." And then 3 days later, Cynthia Mason, who graduated from ESR, but she was a current student at that time, was working in admissions. And she called me up and said, "Hi, I'm Cynthia. I remember you from when you came to speak about urban ministry at ESR. I'm calling to find out where your application is." And I was like, "What the heck?" So then I had to pay attention because I had prayed and I got an answer. And so it took me a little bit longer because I was a little stubborn. I am a stubborn child. So I stayed in Chicago another year, and then I ended up applying afterwards, but I did come. So, yep. And it was a delightful time. I came at a very rich time in the seminary, and very grateful for the experiences.
Thanks, Tracy. Matt.
A long winding road to ESR. I had considered studying religion in undergrad, and that this didn't seem very practical. So I studied politics and economics instead, and ended up working in that field for a while after graduating college. And it was my wife was working in similar field and had a calling to teaching. So she there was no easy way to do that, and so she left her job, and I left mine. We ended up moving down to Mississippi Delta to do 2 years of service with Teach for America. And I was sort of watching her blossom as she did something she was passionate about and connecting with people directly, which you hadn't been able to do previously. That inspired me to take a similar leap. And she said, well, we've done my thing for a couple of years. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I've always thought about seminary, but I really want to go to a Quaker school. And that narrowed things down significantly. As Nikki pointed out, those schools are few and far between. So I'm in contact with ESR and with some other school that offered a program that I don't know that was online at that point. But we came for a visit over Christmas break, the final year we were in Arkansas, and that was freezing cold. It was, there weren't any students on campus, there were hardly any faculty, but it felt like home when I got here. And there was a student at the time, Adriana Cabrera, who was supposed to be here for the alumni work, and she came sort of bobbing along with this very colorful hat on and said, I'd love to show you around campus. And she was very enthusiastic, and I just didn't have any doubts this is where I was supposed to be. And that's where I've been since, so yay.
Thanks, Matt. And I'd like to say both Adriana and Jeff Krim, who were supposed to be on this call, both had some really very tragic news or emergencies, so they weren't able to join us today. So just hold them in the light, keep them in your prayers right now. Michael, do you want to talk about what brought you here?
I'll try to condense it. I went to college at Wilmington College in Ohio, which is a Quaker school, and fell into the fold there. And I had started doctoral work in another field. I was studying musicology, and one day, sitting in this highfalutin seminar, the composer of the day was Olivier Messiaen, who was a mystic, a contemporary mystic. He wrote this music that kind of takes away your sense of time and space, but he gave them his compositions mystical names like Quartet for the End of Time. So we were talking about his music, and everybody else in the room thought that the mystical side of him was an ironic French facade. And I went out of that seminar and I said, I don't think these are my people. I don't think if this is what, it's like in this line of work, I'm not sure these are the folks I want to hang out with for my working life. And I thought, well, I talked to some friends and they said, well, maybe you should go to seminary. And I said, I didn't major in religion. Who will let me in? And I didn't know at the time you can major in underwater basket weaving and go to seminary. But I said, I've been hanging out with these Quakers for the last 5 years. Maybe as an act of desperate kindness, they would look upon me with mercy and let me in. And that's how I got to ESR. And I liked it.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks.
And Michael, what was the name of the composer again?
Olivier Messiaen, Messiaen. Yeah. You should listen to his 9 meditations on the Blessed Trinity. Even a UU would be transported by that. I shouldn't make fun of UUs because my real religion is me.
Thank you. Thanks. I would love to hear from some of our alums about their work that they're currently doing and how they feel that their ESR education is helping them with that work. And I know both Nikki and Tracy, and I know Matt would have a lot to say about it too. But I don't know if Nikki, would you want to speak a little bit about that?
Sure, I can start. Friends United meeting, in case anybody is unfamiliar, is a branch of Quakers, and it is headquartered, I don't know, 7 minutes away from ESR. And they have ministries around the world. So I work in Belize. And here we have a school which was started by a Belizean woman, I think in 1993 or 1994. Tracy, do you know the year better than I know the year? So I learned just now that Tracy, before we started recording, Tracy was the first person to come with FUM to Belize City. So this is very exciting. Very excited.
There've been Quaker schools there kind of off and on for a while. Sadie Vernon started something a long time ago. My mom helped some with some of it, but I can't give you a year.
Yeah, I think Sadie Vernon started this one in 1994. And she was the only Belizean Quaker at the time, from what I understand. And she was at the end of her career, so she called FUM. She's like, you gotta send people down here. Okay, so the school has been pretty consistently going since then. And then about 5 years ago, FUM discerned a need for a church and a community center. And the church really started because a Belizean couple that had lived in Scotland came back to Belize and called the school and said, do you have a meeting? And the Dale Graves, who was acting as the director for a couple of years, he said, well, if you come, there will be. So they came and there was. And we have now a pastor from Kenya who is leading our church. We call it Belize Friends Church. And we also have a community center, which does community education and service projects. Right now, during the pandemic, we're mainly doing food packages because we're not allowed to have gatherings. So we're pretty much doing food packages. And our school is all distance right now, like all the other schools in Belize. And our church is meeting half at a time. So each Sunday, half of our people come and then we switch off. It's kind of agonizing, but it's okay. And so we work mainly with teenage boys. And I am not a Belizean teenage boy, but I find that I get along with them very well. And I think my time at ESR really has helped with that because it helps me, first of all, be aware of issues of, so I've been doing I've lived internationally more in my adult life than I've lived in the US. And a lot of that has been as a missionary, but not all. And so I have been aware for a long time of problems with missionaries and missionary work. And that's one of the things that I particularly learned about more at ESR, because I had questions before, like I had discomfort, but I did not have the vocabulary to talk about it or any solutions at all before I got to ESR. So being there really helped me sort through a lot of that stuff. And, you know, obviously there's always work to do with this. But now I know places to look, people I can talk to when I have concerns. That's been a really important thing at ESR, how it has affected me. Another thing that I learned, which is really important at ESR, has been how to consider power dynamics. And as I work with young people who are from a culture that has less power than my culture has, that has been really important in how I talk and how I behave and how we order our meeting. We are primarily made up of Belizean teenagers. And so we are working towards empowering those teenagers to be the leaders in our church. And I'm just so proud of them. Love them. So there are things like that that have come from my time at ESR that really affects my work here. Theology, I do a lot of preaching at the church. I couldn't do this job without having gone to ESR at all. Like I wouldn't have been hired and I wouldn't have been able to do it. So I'm really grateful for that.
Thanks, Nikki. Tracy, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. So right after ESR, I went right across the street to work at Earlham College, and worked in campus ministries and did a number of other things. But I think the grounding that I received at ESR was so critical to my ability to be able to engage with people who may be very different than me. Because students come from a variety of different theological backgrounds, ethnic, racial, etc. And during my time at ESR, we had a significant number of international students. And so there really was a critical mass of folks of color at the seminary. And so one of the things that was really important was to figure out how you could be true to what you understand about your faith experience, your theological understandings, and at the same time be able to listen to somebody who has very different ways of being in the world. And I think the way the classes are structured and the way the environment really is set creates the conditions for people to wrestle with that and to really, with some sincerity, try to be as authentic as you can, given the fact that part of what happens is in seminary is that you're really getting stripped, right, of the ways in which you think about things so that you can be rebuilt in some ways. And so I think the powerful gift of ESR is that clarity that the seminary has about listening, that if you listen to yourself, the spirit or God or whatever you want to call it, and your neighbor, there's something transformational that can happen. But you have to risk a level of vulnerability. And another way of saying that is that vulnerability creates the conditions for courage, right? And so I think ESR is always in the business of that invitation. And I think that that really helped me while I clearly when I worked at Earlham College, but now in the Southwest, where it is a very diverse and a very different kind of community with very different political, social, and ethnic issues that need to be addressed, that same call to listen and to be vulnerable is present. And so in my time here in Tucson, it is one of the things that has been critical to my success and my ability to really help folks who are engaging in very difficult conflicts to move through those. So in that sense, I think it was a game changer for me.
Thanks, Tracy. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing?
Sorry. I do a number of different things as usual. So I do consulting work with not-for-profit organizations who are really looking at transforming the structures that they have in place. So that's one piece of the work. I also have an art-based production company that I started with a former colleague of mine from Earlham. And we use art as a way to examine questions of human rights. So it could be through music, it could be through plays, it could be through performance art. And currently, I just produced a play by Sean Christopher Lewis. It's called Conceal and Carry, and it looks at gun violence and the impact of gun violence on our society. So yeah, it's a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Mimi Holland, you have a question?
Tracy, that was really interesting what you said about stripped of the way you think about things and then rebuilt. And I was wondering if you could say more about
Oh.
like how that happened.
Oof.
Were you aware of that when it was happening? And like, can you like talk a little bit about the way you thought about things before and then after that experience, please?
Sure. So I came in with quite a bit of ministry experience, and I had a pretty big ego about that, in fact, just to be honest. And so one of the things that there was, and the curriculum is very different now. So some of this may not pertain in terms of the coursework, but there was a particular course that looked at theological reflection. And so as part of that course was really to examine why it is that you believe what you believe. How is it that you've arrived at that point? And, you know, in a class that had folks who came from program friends meetings, folks who were Unitarian Universalists, folks who were Jewish Quakers, who were non-religious at all, and me coming from a particular kind of experience with urban ministry, I came in when this is the way it is. You people need to come on and understand. And one of the things that happened through the reading and through the writing, and of course, fussing and engaging with my peers, is really that ground in which I was standing in terms of my truth was starting to shift, right? And you know, and so here's a clear example. When I came to ESR, I had a very clear sense about how scripture was speaking to us about homosexuality. And it was very interesting to be in a space where there was a lot of a diversity of opinion about that very question and what the scriptures actually have to say about that. And so over time, that I began to see that there were many different ways of reading the same passage. And that doesn't mean that what I believe necessarily isn't true, but it also doesn't believe that what person X believes isn't true also. And so how do I stand in that tension? What is required of me at that particular moment? And so that's what I mean in terms of sort of the scales falling off, right?
Thanks, Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to add something to what you had said earlier. Yeah, did you want to add something? Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to add that one of the really, I was thinking while I was answering in terms of like my job responsibilities and what ESR had to do with that, but in a larger sense, like as a person in ministry, one of the major things that I found at ESR was the discernment of gifts and callings, and considering who we are and how we're made and what we're called for. And I believe that I left ESR with an immeasurably clearer idea of who I am and how I work in the world, what I need to thrive. And the ways that I can contribute in any of the work that I do, how I can do that out of the way God made me. I thought that was a really important thing from ESR.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm wondering if maybe I could open it up for questions from the current students or from Mimi, or for each of you, if you have questions for each other. If we want to do that. Or
I would,
ahead.
and if I may, please, the idea of, and some of you touched on this a little bit, of like, I'm here right now before I engage in these studies, and then I'll be someplace else after it. And there are all sorts of wonderful things that I hope to learn and ways to grow, but then I also want a job at the end, practically. I guess, like, I'm interested in what was the support or the structure of the practical side of things. If any of you could talk about that, please.
I can definitely say something to that. And because I'm not 6 months deep into the program, and I'm already thinking exit. And my elders have counseled, real talk. I'm already considering, because that's something that my elders counseled me before I entered seminary. Make sure that you are fully present, but also think to what end is it going to serve? Not just in terms of remuneration, but what is your vocation and what are you called to do? Because as Professor Burkle stated, you get a sense of, do I really want to hang out with this kind of person for the next 30 years? And if the answer is no, you may be moved in a different direction than what you initially thought. The program in which I am immersed currently, my water, if you will, the environment in which I breathe, is entrepreneurial ministry. And that program in particular is very appealing to me because at the center of any entrepreneurial question is how to think critically with a rapidly changing environment and learning how to adapt to those rapidly changing circumstances. And lo and behold, what is the historical backdrop in which I'm entering seminary? This particular global condition where so many traditional businesses, traditional forms of employment are changing and will remain changed for quite some time. So even if you enter, it'll still be different 3 years plus. So I think engaging critically in terms of what you know your own skills are, and hearing from other people, that's been particularly useful for me. People will signal to you whether, as the sister just shared, whether the things that you think I'm good at, I'm called, this is what my gifts are. People will sometimes, they will help you course correct because they will tell you that is not really your calling. And sometimes elders will help you in other ways. So it is, I think of it as a multi-layered cake. And one of the bases of that cake is personal work, as was shared in reading the text themselves and getting a clear sense of how you look at the world. And then as how you look at the world, as that flavor changes, if you will, it will inform what the overall substance of the cake is in terms of getting a sense of, maybe it turns out that you're not a velvet cake. Maybe it turns out that you are, and then learning about not necessarily shifting or changing, or most importantly, not trying to become what you think an employer wants you to be, but rather just recognizing that there are ingredients in your spiritual life about which you were unaware. And it makes you more aware that, I have raisins and I didn't know that before. Okay. And then it will help you as you begin to think of a remuneration, how you can best align with something that both will help you sustain yourself, but also speaks to and aligns with your conscience. And so I found that particularly helpful in an environment where the unemployment rate, the statistics for the millennial generation, et cetera, are as dire as they are, to recognize and remember that even as regards employment, the central thing that we're learning is spiritual discernment, but in the outward sense, we are learning critical thinking. And so that will apply across the board.
I think the relationships that you cultivate during your time at ESR are going to bode you well in terms of helping you eventually when you're ready for whatever that work is. I can't tell you how significant social capital is in terms of employment. And so the kinds of relationships, and I don't know if you're Quaker or what denomination you come from, but those relationships and the way in which you show up will be very helpful for you. And I'll use myself as an example. I did not know what I was going to do when I left ESR at all. And I was like, oh my gosh, everybody was sort of doing something or trying to figure out. I got a call from Monty Snyder, who used to teach at Earlham, about working with her on a book that looked at consensus, because I've been a clerk for numbers of groups and for my meeting. And so she offered me a job. And that job sort of opened the door for other positions for me at Earlham College. So one of the things is, I think really important are the kinds of activities you involve yourself in, particularly if it is the kind of work that you want to do is within Quaker circles, because maybe you don't, maybe you want to do something else. But within that frame, I think those relationships help to seed you and help people to know what you may be desiring in terms of work. So.
Nikki, you wanted to add something?
In the last year of ESR, there's a class, which is, it's an internship. It's the whole year, but it can be something that you're paid for. It doesn't have to be like a volunteer thing. But the whole class is about how to apply what you've learned in seminary to your ministry and your work. And I found it to be incredibly practical because we were all put into this situation and it depends on the person. By the time I was planning my internship, I had 3 possibilities. 2 were offered to me and 1 I saw in my community. So, and when I started at ESR, I didn't know about any of those. I had no idea what I would do for an internship. I think what Tracy said about relationships is really, it's something I hadn't really thought about before, but it's real. And that's how that happened. Like you're there and you meet people. ESR incident reports. So you look very carefully at what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I don't know, it's so good and so incredibly practical. And I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think all of my classmates that were in that class with me are working now in jobs that they feel really passionate about.
Nikki, did
and
you
I thought I
name
was
the
going
class?
to seminary. I'm sorry, what?
Did you name the class?
I graduated in May.
No, I mean, like discernment of gifts or the
Oh, discernment of gifts of calling comes first, and then in the last year, supervised ministry. It's called supervised ministry.
You still got it.
And I thought when I started at ESR, I thought I was going to do one thing after I graduated, and now I'm doing something totally different. Like I mean, I feel like openness is a positive thing when you're going to ESR. I think it makes the stripping process easier if you're open. So you're not clinging. Yeah.
That's true. Lynn, I'm wondering if you might want to speak a little bit about the work that you did that may not have been directly related to your MDiv or your ESR education, but how do you feel that it helped inform the work that you did?
What I did at ESR helped me become who I was meant to be. I showed up there with a lot of baggage. My dad had died not long before I got there. My brother died, my adopted brother died while I was there. I had baggage from childhood like we all do, but it was pretty heavy and was really detrimental to me living my life. And there were some wonderful professors that were there at the time who took time out of their busy schedules to counsel me, basically. Let me talk to them for hours. I'm sure it was exhausting, but because I had a lot of stuff to work through, but their willingness to listen and allow me to work through that was just crucial. Because I would not be the person today that I am if I had not had the opportunity of a safe place to work through that. I've met some wonderful friends too, Michael being one of them, lots of other people who were very supportive and helpful and all of that. But job wise, I learned what I was not good at, and that, you know, there's something to be said for that. I knew when I left that I was right. I am not called to be a pastoral minister, and my ministry project was as a youth pastor. Boy, was I not called to do that. And that's good to know. So it really just laid the groundwork for, you know, helping me pull out the gifts and talents that God had given me, but they were kind of buried when I got there, and ESR gave me the place to dig them up and begin that healing process so that I could become, so that my life could become a ministry. I've never, like I said, never intended to be a pastoral minister and never felt called to do that at all. But my whole life has been a ministry. What I've learned at ESR has carried me through teaching school, being a social worker, being a librarian. I mean, I have done all of those things better because of the healing that I was able to do while I was a student at ESR.
Thank you so much for that. We've got just a few minutes left. Wondering if there are any other questions from the current students, prospective students, even for each other. Please do feel comfortable about having just some conversation about the work that you're doing.
I'd be quite curious as to the thoughts of the prospective student who asked about the stripping away or the moving from point A to point B. What are your thoughts, or what are your reflections about what you're hoping your time at seminary may bring to you?
Wow, yeah, that's a big question. I've felt a fairly strong calling to work as a chaplain. And like right now I'm thinking like in a hospital or at like end of life, with end of life decisions. So in a practical sense, I want to be prepared for that. My understanding of that career is that there are, that it's not just a feel-good job. There are legit things that you have to learn. Like almost, it seems almost like similar to like being a doctor or a nurse. And I think of a chaplain in part as being a cardiologist, like as a person who truly studies the matter of the heart, in the way that we're now starting to look at emotions and spirituality as being beneficial and intrinsic to life itself. So I'm hoping to learn those practical things of like, how do you be with someone in those really heightened moments. And then, you know, I just want to devote a couple years to reading and talking about the things that I'm so passionate about. I want to stop being the weirdo religious person. Because in my circle, and I have dear friends, like lifetime friends, who just don't have faith as part of their life or don't express it in the same way I do. And there is something comforting about being with my church friends. And then I also wanted to mention, I love, and I asked about that idea of stripping away the how you said that, Tracy. There's, I love the fiction of C.S. Lewis. And the other day, Michael, in your class, you were talking about having an author or a book that you felt really was your friend. And C.S. Lewis's fiction, I feel like that is not just my friend, but my family. Like Till We Have Faces, those are my sisters. And in one of the Chronicles of Narnia, I don't remember which one, but the brother, the naughty mean brother, which Nikki, I see you mouthing it, but I don't. Edmund, yes. He's just being so awful. And he gets lured away by a dragon and the riches of the dragon. And then he turns into a dragon, and Aslan comes to visit, and Edmund as a dragon is emerged in this water, and he feels the scales of the dragon being torn away from him. And he talks about the presence of Aslan, as I feel it being God, caring for him and holding him during this pain of just ripping away all of these things that he isn't, so that he can have the security to be who he is. And maybe you remember that. Well, clearly, Nikki, you do.
Well, I asked that question only because this interaction is precisely what you can expect in Formation 101 and Formation 102, and that kind of exploration of self. And it seems like you are well poised to enter those sorts of discussions. And I do need to run, but I just want to leave by reminding you that history never remembers ordinary people.
Yeah.
It's only the eccentrics that are remembered. Yeah? So continue to have the courage to be exactly who you are. I'm glad to have met you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Say.
Okay, bye-bye.
See ya. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and sorry it didn't work out with the prospective students come, but I'm very grateful that we have this recording that we can send to them, because what you have all said is just amazing. I couldn't have, well, I know I couldn't have scripted it. I wouldn't be good at that, but you just all really are just so wonderful in the way that you express what your experience was. So I really appreciate that. Matt, I don't know if there's anything more you want to say in closing.
Just to echo what you've shared, this is a phenomenal group of people, and we hope that you will consider joining our community. And you already have, so welcome.
Yes, yeah. Now, one way or another, Mimi, you have joined our community. I've really enjoyed interacting with you in the classes, the sample classes that you took, and during the other activities too. I've really enjoyed getting to know you.
Thank you. This has been really useful. This is a huge decision. I'm trying to decide between two very different schools, one in an urban setting, one in a more rural setting. And I'm just trying to weigh my priorities with that. And it's a really important decision to me. So it's just, but this is really useful. And thank you everyone for being so open.
And thanks. It was so good seeing everybody here. Miss seeing your faces. Thanks again. I'll talk to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.